What's going on, everyone? My name's Tenebris Infinite and welcome back to Nightingale 0.2. We covered a ton of things last week in regards to the update, but we have a few more things to get to here. And one of the really fun ones is the new combinations we can make in the game. From hammers that send continuous shockwaves, to combining the new sickle throw and the new throwable weapons, which becomes the coolest combination of using dodge to control your distance, and absolutely melts enemies even if they resist the damage types themselves. I aim to come up with some of the funnest combinations of weapons, enchantments, charms, and stats to make things that were not only enjoyable to do, but also insanely effective. So today I'll show you all these combinations here in Nightingale so you could start doing them yourself in your moment-to-moment gameplay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button or consider subscribing to stick around for all my future Nightingale content. But now, let's jump into these combinations, starting with the easy to pull off combos and working on to the more technical ones as we go along. So I tried to come up with fun names for all these combos in the video, but if you have any ideas for names for these, let me know in the comments down below. First up, we have what I'm calling the Shmammer, a shockwave hammer balanced between magic and strength to have a devastating flurry of attacks. With huge knockback potential, crowd control, and enhanced damage, the Shmammer is a great option if you want to have a repair tool on hand, but also be sure it's ready to be used in combat as well. And if you really want to embrace your inner chaos, you don't even need to hit your enemies. Just smack the ground as fast as you can for continuous AoE explosions. The balance between magic and strength means that the hammer itself will deal the most it can per swing, but each hit for like 900 to 1000 damage will be further boosted by like 5000 magic damage, which really ups this tool's effectiveness. Each weapon and materials will be listed in a pinned comment down below, but if you aim for crits with this hammer build, you'll see a really good damage output. Of course, your full build will decide a lot of that damage still, but we'll be getting into full builds very soon here on the channel, this week even, so stay tuned for that. The real key to the Shmammer is that you only have 9 hits of shockwave, so you'll want to hit the enemy a few times, then dodge back and recharge the spell to keep the shockwave damage applied. You could start winding up before hitting an enemy though to just dump like 9 hits in the span of a second. Just don't try to fix your house while shockwave is active because that probably won't end well. It's a really easy combo here. It doesn't need any specific timing or even thought process really. You just cast your spell and start blasting. This combination is fun as heck, kinda silly, but also surprisingly effective. But really, I love this animation, and like all the animations in the game, there's so much character in how you just start bonking away like crazy. Again, the full build is listed below, but if you want to put this together for yourself, really the main point is putting shockwave on a hammer. At this point, it's going to be an essential enchantment to put on a hammer for me. So next up, let's look at the Shockarang and the Flamerang, patent pending for Standard Deviant who came up with the original concept last week. The design of this build is to have a high magic sickle specifically for casting these two spells and getting the most use out of them. Last week we looked at the Shockarang, which we'll look at again quickly today, but the other thing I experimented with and was happy to find out is that the spell boomerang thing not only works amazing in combination with Shockwave, but the new throwing sickle works great with Hermetic's Flame as well, allowing you to have a medium-ranged fire magic attack that has a crazy amount of utility. Again, just clearing huge amounts of enemies out of your way, whether it's in a vault or a max level ascended realm. From start to finish, this boss fight, which usually is a bit time consuming due to the Jotun tree's resistances, is done in just around a minute and 10 seconds. Which, yeah, sure, you could come in here and blast this dumb tree with a shotgun and fire buckshot and just obliterate it off the face of the earth. But then there's this as an option too, for a fast and, most importantly, more fun fight against these endgame enemies. You'll want to be careful with an umbrella, as using the umbrella to glide will cancel your spell, but if you boost your magic further on a good umbrella build, you can get some crazy results out of these two boomerang spells. And the nice thing is, this again is easy to pull off. You just cast your spell, then use ability 2, which is nice in comparison to some of the later combinations we'll look at today. The damage buff is solid, and the nice thing is you can use fire element damage on the fly, all while looking sick while you do it. And then on the flip side, we have the Shockarang, where you put Shockwave again on a magic-based sickle, then use ability 2 for a long-range Shockwave attack that gets a really nice damage boost. This is great for crowd control and melting weaker enemies and lesser bound, but even more so does a great job at clearing out endgame bound types and apex creatures. Also, as an added benefit, using the sickle throw attack more frequently like this will have you having more fiber than is probably healthy for the average diet. So that's a plus too. This is also equally great for clearing out huge hordes of enemies, like when the Sun Giant summons automatons, or for focusing damage and stagger on a single enemy. It pretty much turns your sickle into a magic cannonball or flamethrower in a really unique way. This build is simple to put together, requiring just a magic sickle with either or both spells, but most importantly very effective at turning the sickle into a much more versatile weapon. And I think both Shockarang and Flamerang look pretty cool too on top. Now we'll move on to the medium difficulty combos here in Nightingale, simply due to the timing some of these require and some other things you'll need to follow. First, we'll be combining the sickle and the throwing knife to have a double ranged attack. But before I could get to setting this combination up, I had a question. What type of sickle best benefits the boomerang attack? And after testing this with a bunch of different sickle builds, the abilities attack is purely benefited by melee damage. So if you want to aim for the best sickle throw you could do without spells involved, melee damage is what you want to go for. So for this one, I'm just calling this the good old-fashioned dual wielding, and the main point of this is having a sickle with good melee damage alongside a throwing knife aimed for crits and range damage. Then add in the charm of the arsenal on the throwing knife so that every time you alternate between the sickle throw and the knife, you'll get a flat boost to your damage. And the weapon combination is complete. Really, the sickle I'm using is not very good, though the throwing knife is really good. But even being more of a ranged build than a melee one, it still made a huge difference because both weapons get buffed as long as you're keeping up a good offense. The 49k came from the Charm of Patience, which gives a really good damage boost, then the 28k is from the Charm of the Arsenal, and the almost 19k is when neither of the charms are affecting my damage. It could be a bit hit and miss sometimes with the damage buff. It can end kinda abruptly here, but overall you'll see an increase to your damage output when using the two in combination. Next is the timing. For the throwing knife and the sickle, you'll need a very brief delay before you throw the sickle, otherwise the throwing knife will be cancelled out. And you have to throw the knife first, as during the sickle throw you cannot use your offhand, which I think is appropriate. You're focusing on your boomerang wizardry and all. You could check if your throwing knife is properly being thrown by testing this out on a rock or an obstacle, and checking if your throwing knife is sticking out of it after doing the combo. But when all put together, this combo is excellent. You need to balance distance between you and your enemy, so you'll want some good stamina buffs to dodge a lot. But when in control of your boomerang's reach, you could use the two in very fast succession and output a ton of damage, clearing out groups of enemies in seconds or taking down strong late game foes. Even against an enemy that resists ranged damage, they don't stand a chance. You don't have to worry about being too fast with this combo, just aim to be consistent and accurate and you'll shred your way through any realm. Now, working with a similar idea as the last dual wielding setup, but with its own quirks and things to know, let's look at dual wielding grenades and the boomerang sickle. Right off the bat, you can already tell that you could throw the two in much quicker succession than the throwing knife, where you needed a small delay before throwing the knife. you can almost throw these at the exact same time instead. But if you do, sadly only the sickle will throw. But this is another really deadly combination. When you have the Charm of Arsenal on your grenades, you'll get buffed sickle throws, and then buffed grenades, which equals a crazy amount of damage. Though there are a few more safety guidelines to follow. When you aren't blowing yourself up, this is a really good combo to use against Apex creatures and vault bosses. But you really do have to be careful about the blast radius on your grenades. Since you'll be using the sickle throw in combination, you'll want to be a medium distance from your enemy, which puts you right outside the damage zone of the grenade. So you'll want to be a bit cautious when hucking nades at something that's charging you. But really, grenades are so OP in the game right now that you kinda don't need the buff. This is just there to give you a bit more freedom in your gameplay when using these deadly little spheres. And lastly, the more difficult techniques in this video. Using Charm of Momentum to boost your damage with weapons we couldn't previously get a huge boost on. These are all the two-handed weapons in the game, but I'll show examples here of a Maul and a Metford weapon setup that is just disgusting now. For the Maul, we have a pure melee-focused Dauntless Maul made out of Advanced Lacunas and Tier 3 Beelzebub, and then the essential Charm of Momentum on any piece of clothing. I went for the boots as I had a free slot there. But even on a build that has like barely any melee on it, this combination is so overpowered. Using our movement speed alone, we can push the damage up for this Maul to crazy amounts. Before we get into just how wild this combination is, I'd like to give a shout out to Ponderwild for the suggestion of making these momentum-based weapons. They turned out really great, dude. Thank you very much for the suggestion here. So the thing about the momentum Maul that makes it tricky is the timing. You really have to pay attention to when your swing is landing and when you're at your highest movement speed from dodging. And also make sure that you have your spacing right so that you aren't over or under dodging. This will take a few attempts to get down, but once you practice a bit and use this next tip that I have here, this actually becomes pretty reliable as a method of doing crazy damage with a Maul or other two-handed weapon. You can see we are now boosting our damage to well above 10,000 when our normal damage is about 6,000. And when stacked with Charm of Patience and the right momentum, we can push our damage up to 30 and 40,000. And even higher when we get peak frame perfect on our swing. The thing you're looking for is when you're just bringing your weapon down. Dodging is really fast, so you don't need much time between the dodge and the swing of the weapon. So look for when your Maul, axe, or pick, or even pickaxe is about to fall through its swing, and dodge then to get the easiest timing of hitting when you're moving the fastest from your dodge. You might think, why not just run and hit enemies? And you do get a solid damage boost from that, but dodging is so much faster that you can really push your damage up to crazy amounts when you have good timing with this. Even against a Sun Giant who resists blunt damage like Mauls will fall relatively easily, at least for using a non-optimal weapon against it. And against bugs and stuff that are weak to blunt damage, it's just an easy one-shot even on fabled creatures. And for our last combo of the day, working on the same premise but boosted even further, a ranged setup that uses Charm of Called Shots alongside Charm of Momentum. You could put this on a melee build, but I feel you'd hurt your overall damage potential. But with a ranged weapon, using the boost from Momentum becomes a little easier. So when you start to use that specifically for crits and hard shots, this just snowballs to insane amounts of damage. Even without called shots, we're seeing wild damage increases of like almost 4 times the damage, which is much easier to time and has a huge range on the Lee Metford. And even when you aren't getting the timing perfect, you'll still see a great increase to your damage. Now my build is built for ranged and magic damage, but as I said earlier on in the video, we'll be diving into making builds here this week, and the first one I'll be doing is a ranged build. So stay tuned for a day or so from now for a build that you can put together really easily here in the game. Either way, for now, this is some crazy damage, and all you need to do is fire when you're dodging, and have a Lee Metford built for ranged damage with a Charm of Called Shots. Your damage will increase based on how fast you're moving in your dodge, so you'll want to pay attention to when you're at that maximum speed amount. But overall, this is easier than the momentum Maul because you don't need to time your animations. Just dodge and shoot, which is what you'd probably be doing anyway. And though your base damage will be nerfed by called shots, meaning attacks that aren't crits will deal less damage, the boost from momentum will negate that, meaning misaimed shots won't be made as ineffective. It's really a win-win weapon setup. This is best used for hunting apex creatures and general combat. It's a really fun combination that works extremely well in the game here. And as a final bonus tip here, I gave it before, but I don't see many people use it. If you skin a creature by aiming away from it and slicing, it is way faster than using the typical skinning animation. So there we go, 7 crazy weapon combinations you can make in Nightingale as of 0.2. And I'm really excited to see how these get expanded on, from new weapon types and abilities to new charms and enchantments, and how they'll all blend together. I want to know, are any of these combinations something you think you'll use now in the game? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And also, hey, if you have any weapon combinations that you do use currently, maybe throw them into the comments below too. I'd like to hear what you folks are using in the game. But for now, thank you for watching. Again, stay tuned for a bunch more videos coming out this week. But either way, I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, peace.